Welcome to Conquering Your Clownfish, a podcast dedicated to transforming disabilities into special abilities. I'm your host, Brady Murray. Welcome to the Conquering Your Clownfish podcast. It is my privilege to welcome our special guest today, Amy Julia Becker. She's a remarkable author, speaker, podcast host, and a dedicated advocate for individuals with disabilities. Amy Julia's journey began with the birth of her oldest daughter, Penny, who has Down syndrome. Since that day, Amy Julia and her family have been learning from Penny and through her since the day she was born. Amy Julia inspires others to envision a world where everyone belongs and everyone matters. Welcome to the show, Amy Julia.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun to be able to visit. I have to say, so I'm a big baseball fan, and I know you're not so much like baseball, professional sports, but I know that Penny and her dad are, and they're big Yankees fans. Is that correct?
It is true.
Yep.
Yes.
So I love that, and I just think that that is really cool that she really gets into that because that is a cool thing, and what a great year for the Yankees.
Well, it's really fun because we have this old photo of her in a Derek Jeter t-shirt when she was 3 years old that I was able to find this year because she and her dad, Penny gives him a Yankees update every single night before bed during the season, even out of season, actually, if there's anything that might have happened to a player during, preseason, et cetera. She gives a score report and tells him what's going on. And then they pretty, faithfully they went to two games this summer together, and then they watched, obviously, all of the playoff games, and he got to explain to her how playoffs work in terms of, well, we don't know how many games it's going to be, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so it was really fun for her. Even though they did not win the World Series, it was still really fun that they went, and for her to be able to see, like, oh, I was around 15 years ago, the last time they got to the World Series. So it was a very fun season for both of them together.
Most definitely. And that just warmed my heart so much to be able to see that, and that's like a dream come true for a dad who likes baseball, to have a daughter or a son who just loves to follow along, and that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, it's a great, they actually, before bed, they have lots of different teams, not like competing baseball teams, but there's the Saints, because my husband's from New Orleans, and then UVA, because he went there for college, and the various other schools that we're affiliated with, and the Yankees. They cheer for all of them before bed. She's 18 now, so she often goes to bed after we do, but if they're going to bed around the same time, we get a cheer for all the different teams.
She's great. Well, I have some ideas. We're big baseball people, and I have some ideas on how we can get Penny out to a ball game and have some good times. So this will be a lot of fun.
Oh, fun.
Yep. Very good. So I want to start with, traditionally in these podcasts, we'll start in the beginning and when Penny's born and just kind of your transition into that. But I want to start differently. I want to ask you about belovedness and what that means to you, and what that means to you and how you have found that.
Yeah, so I think belovedness means to me the idea that every human being is inherently beloved. I mean, loved, and in the way I think about it is loved by God, and not just by kind of a vague, abstract God, but by a God who actually created each and every one of us with a purpose. So there's a loveliness and a lovableness and a belovedness that does not have to do with performance or achievement, but actually with being, like just with being who we are. I also, though, think that for most parents understand belovedness, whether or not you have like a faith in a God of love, and most of us have human relationships with belovedness. Not all of them. We have lots of relationships that seem much more transactional, right? Like I give you something and you give me something in return, and it feels a little bit like I owe you a debt. And belovedness, there's never debt involved. And so it's, for me, growing up, my grandfather was the person who, when I walked into the room, his eyes lit up, his face got excited, and I just knew that it didn't have to do with the fact that I got a good grade. It just had to do with me being there. And that's that sense of belovedness. And honestly, Penny is the person who really, as much as I, again, would have said that I believed in a God who loved me, Penny was the one who helped me understand the difference between earning or proving my lovableness and simply receiving the belovedness that God already wanted to give me. And she did that because when she was diagnosed with Down syndrome and when I kind of had an understanding of intellectual disability and recognized that although she was a gifted person who was filled with possibilities, that's not how she was going to be seen by many, many others. And so recognizing again her inherent worth and value and belovedness helped me to see that not only for her, but actually in myself as well. And it was really freeing to think about living out of that place rather than out of a place of like striving to achieve more and constantly trying to prove myself.
Yeah, that is a beautiful description. And thank you for sharing that. That's a concept that is something that I would say is the superpower of individuals with Down syndrome in their ability to be able to help us feel what belovedness is and help us to be able to show that to others as well. That is a naturally inherent gift that oftentimes individuals with Down syndrome, really in many disabilities, I would say that there's an inherent gift, but that especially rings true with our experience and what we've had obviously with our children that have Down syndrome. So was it like that from the moment that you met Penny, or did that take some time for you to be able to feel that?
So that's a great question. For me to be able to feel that about myself definitely took time. And when we received Penny's diagnosis, when she was in the room with us, I think there was very much a sense of that belovedness. It was almost impossible not to just absolutely love this tiny little baby, which I'm sure, again, many parents have had that experience. When she was out of the room and we had this diagnosis that seemed abstract and scary and unknown, then it felt like, honestly, I mean, like the world was falling apart. I mean, they were the contrast between those two experiences. And it really felt like there was a fight between fear and love.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I do believe we learned in those early years also was that the power of love is actually stronger than the power of fear. But we also have to, again, kind of dig into that love, like continue to choose to return to that place of belovedness for her and for us, which doesn't mean that the fears are something to ignore entirely, but at the same time, to not let that be the overwhelming, prevailing voice. And that took a while to believe that kind of her physical presence, her reality, her particularity was what we should be paying attention to, not to predictions about all the things that might go wrong in her life. And so that is something I return to again and again, the idea that actually I used to have a podcast, I changed the name of it, but it was called Love is Stronger Than Fear for exactly that reason, because I needed to remember that and remind myself of it actually all the more when I started to feel afraid. So all that is to say, I would say I pretty early on saw what belovedness was, but I would say that it took a lot longer for me to experience that for myself and to make those connections.
Beautiful. How has that impacted your children and your husband, this special individual with these superpowers, as I refer to him, that ability to love and express and help others to feel love unconditionally? How have you seen that manifest in your family?
I think Peter and I would both say, Penny is our oldest child, and we have two younger kids, and we would both say that without even meaning to, we probably would have tried to shape our kids into what we thought they were supposed to be. And rather than really receiving them as the gifts that they are and understanding the great honor and privilege it is to help them become who they were created to be. And so that really changed our parenting for all three of them. And I think it actually also changed our perspectives on ourselves, the way we treat one another, a willingness to kind of recognize both limitations that we have as humans and be gracious in that, but also to believe that everyone is like filled with possibilities. And so to kind of be excited about what the possibilities are for each other and for ourselves. So it feels like we've all been less afraid of failure and more willing to try things because we believe we can learn and grow, but also that if it doesn't work out and we've got human limits, well, yeah, that's what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And to also feel like much less like we have to be autonomous individuals who figure everything out for ourselves and work everything out and get everything right. And instead seeing the beauty of actually needing each other. And so that's something I've actually recently really been struck by, that we are, as humans, we are needy, like we are people who need things, and we are needed, like other people need us. And I think that's kind of beautiful, that idea of being both needy and needed. And I'm not sure I would have understood that certainly in the same way without Penny. And I think Peter would say the same. And our younger kids would say that they've actually, we live in a kind of high achieving cultural setting in terms of living in the Northeast and the schools that we're a part of. And our younger kids would say that they feel less pressure in our household than they see other kids and their households. And I think it has a lot to do with the way Penny has shaped and formed our life as a family.
That is a great example. And we're treading in some pretty deep water here, really, as you think about it. As parents, we naturally aspire and want the very best for our children. And oftentimes that roadblock that we self-impose is we define what is best, what is very best for our children. And our intentions are well, and they are coming from a pure intent, I would say, but oftentimes are misguided. And with what you've just described is one of the beautiful blessings and benefits of having a child that has a disability, because it allows us, it gives us permission, if you may, to be able to allow that child to become who they're meant to become, not who we feel like they are meant to become. It is more natural. And from what I'm hearing, this ability to be able to take that mindset and that core belief and pass that to your children, and allowing them to ultimately, my words, sing the song that they're meant to sing, realize their divine purpose in what they're doing, is a tremendous gift that's a result of Penny. And so that is so well articulated.
Thank you. Yeah, when Penny was born, this was actually kind of amazing. There was a little baby girl born in the room next door about 2 hours later. So right after we'd gotten Penny's diagnosis, we could hear this other family. And as it happened, the person in the room said, "She's perfect, she's perfect, she's perfect," about this other little girl who was born. And that kind of lodged in me, because I felt like what I was being told was that I had an imperfect child. And I kept thinking about it, and I was actually in seminary at the time. So I was learning Greek, which I can no longer say that I know, but back then I kind of did. And there's a verse in the Bible where Jesus says, "Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect." And I thought, well, this is terrible language. I hate this. Like, I don't like this perfection language. But I looked it up, and that word perfect in Greek is not the way I think of it, at least in English, where it's like, oh, become the best, become the ideal, be better than everybody else, and get everything right. The word is actually telos, which means the end for which you are created. So we could translate, instead of be perfect, we could say be who you are created to be. And there was so much like freedom and beauty in that idea, that God has created us with a purpose, and that our perfection is living into that purpose, not getting everything right all the time or being able to do everything for ourselves. So that really, guided me early on, and has continued to be just, as you said, like a gift in the way I'm able to see myself and others.
Mm-hmm. That is awesome. This is great. So I have to ask, you obviously have tremendous intellect. You have an incredible understanding on very deep and profound principles that come from what I can gather, a tremendous faith in God, but also a tremendous understanding of some of these complex concepts. You have a wonderful way of being able to teach them and share them in a simple way. You've authored 4 books. You host a podcast. You regularly are a guest speaker, presenter, contributor to various news outlets. And you also offer incredible webinars and opportunities for families that are on this journey with a disability to be able to learn these principles and apply these principles that you've been sharing. Where did this come from? You're a very talented person. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so I have always been someone who loves language, words, communicating. I actually learned as an adult, actually when I was kind of in the disability space, there's something called hyperlexia, which is where you kind of like almost learned how to read without anyone teaching you. And I think I was one of those kids. Like my mom is like, no, really, I had nothing to do with it. Like you just were reading and I was a voracious early reader. So I've always been someone who kind of can live in my head for good and for ill. And, who really enjoyed ideas and thinking about things. At the same time, I also, as I said before, was like in such a kind of achievement culture and felt like I had to prove myself that could go really badly for me in the sense that I got really, really good grades, but I was incredibly anxious and really felt like if I'm not perfect, then I'm not actually good enough. And so it's a kind of a separate story, but in high school, I did end up with a severe eating disorder. I was hospitalized. So I was like, on the one hand, getting in early to Princeton University, and on the other hand, once I got there, was like taken to the emergency room because my heart might stop beating because I didn't have enough potassium. I was like 95 pounds or something. So yeah, like it was not good. It was not healthy. And I think that's part of why I can look back and say from the outside looking in, people thought I had this perfect life. I got really good grades. I got into the college you want to go to. I could, get the things I wanted. And it clearly was not actually what I wanted because there was just this deep aching place in me that needed to know I was loved, independent of all of those things. And so what's beautiful about that is the sense that there is something true about who I am that I love, like truly love reading and writing and being able to communicate. But when I was directing all of that energy towards proving myself, it was like shattering myself. But when I could direct that energy towards simply, again, like kind of becoming who God made me to be and getting to love people and explore in the ways that I've been gifted to do that, then I got to like really thrive, and to be able to say, yeah, there's some things that I'm really not good at. And there are other things that I really love doing, and what a gift that I get to contribute that to the world. And so for me, it felt pretty natural that reading and writing would be a part of and communicating, I guess, in general, speaking, teaching, all of that made a lot of sense, but I never would have expected it to take the form it did, in terms of being able to write books. And yeah, as you said, it's not just, there is a teaching element, but there's also just this relational element of being able to be, kind of bear witness to beauty in the world and to love and to goodness and to help to really, my imagination has been changed because of having Penny in my life, my imagination about what it is to be human, my ability to see something different. And so if I get to be a part of that through all of these different things, books and podcasts and teaching and so forth, then like what a gift that is to me.
Amy, Julia, thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing. I feel like I'm just receiving just a fountain of insight and light as we visit here. This is actually super special conversation. I want to ask you, so maybe let me preface this. Your husband, Peter, I've never met, but in the little bit that I have learned about him, he's a very gifted individual as well, very intelligent, smart, talented individual. And I have to imagine that you two met and that your parents were so excited because their prized children are finally, with one another and the things that they're going to accomplish together. And, you have these aspirations and these dreams and also these expectations that you've been living up to and that you guys are accomplishing together. And then you welcome your first child into your life. And you that you are told after birth, the diagnosis of Down syndrome. How has that how was that in that moment? Because see, you guys were supposed to have the perfect child, the
Right.
child that's going to become the president of Princeton, right? But yet all of that changed in that moment. Can you share about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really grateful to say that our families were tremendously supportive from the get-go. So we actually, Penny was not only our firstborn, but actually the first grandchild on both sides of the family, because Peter and I are both firstborn.
Wow.
Um, and Peter's mom had actually died a couple years before Penny was born. So our Penny was born. She's named for her grandmother.
Hmm.
But my parents, as much as they also have kind of come out of this achievement culture, I mean, I will say, I remember asking, like, my mom was actually in the room when she was delivered. It was a holiday weekend, and I'm the oldest of four girls, and the doctor knew my mom had been present for a lot of birth, and she said, "Could you be here? Like, we're a little short staffed." So my mom was there, and she could tell when Penny was born that her body didn't look the same as the babies she'd been around as, very, very new and newborn. So she stayed quiet, but she was attentive. And I remember saying really early on, again, I was in seminary at the time, so I had all these theological ideas in my head. And I said, and I saw at the time, I saw disability as a part of like the fallenness of the world. I saw it as the way I would have put it was a manifestation of sin in the world. And I didn't mean by that Penny had done something morally bad or that we had as her parents, but just that like all of creation is fallen and that must be what happened here. And so I asked that question. I said, I'm just trying to figure out, like, how is this a manifestation of sin in the world or something like that? And my mom said, well, all I can see that is a manifestation of sin comes in how we respond to Penny. So if we're going to reject a beautiful, beloved baby, we are the ones who need to be asking about sin. We don't need to be asking about that when it comes to her creation and her birth. And that statement, which was literally in the hospital, I mean, 24 hours after she was born, was, again, one of those like reframing moments for me. And it certainly indicated from my family a sense of welcome, and we're here for you. And my mom has plenty of faults, and yet she also, like, I mean, she just showed up. So she was there for 2 weeks is when Penny was born. Then my sister came. It was like just an ongoing round of support from the family. And my mom came for one night a week for the next 5 years, and spent the night and said, "You guys go have dinner, do what you need to do. I'm not here for you to pay attention to me. I'm here so that you can, take a run, get some sleep." I mean, she would tell me, "Go journal," because she knew that that was what her daughter needed. And so anyway, so I will say Penny has been a transformative presence for all of us, but also she brought out some really beautiful things in terms of, yeah, I'm obviously talking about my mom, but I would say the whole family really did run to embrace her and us, immediately, and in a way that no one, yeah, I didn't, it doesn't, I guess it doesn't shock me, but I also didn't know that would happen.
Yeah. I would say I've spoke with, I mean, I don't want to go as far as saying hundreds, but pretty darn close family,
Yeah.
and hearing their diagnosis story, hearing their family's reaction, hearing how they processed it. And I have to say, what you just described, I feel like is arguably the single best experience that I think I've heard of what a family could experience in that moment. And I just, if your mom ever listens to this or your family, I just commend them, because that is exactly what a family, a new mom, a new dad would need, is what
Yeah.
they provided. And so that's pretty incredible. And it makes sense why you guys are having the impact that you are right now. So in the few minutes that we have left, I would love to hear about what's next. I mean, Minnie's 18. That's a naturally transitionary time of life. You obviously have really leaned into this calling and this entrusted gift of the world of Down syndrome that has come to you and your family, and been such an incredible part and member of this community and leader in this community. What's next? we fast forward 18 years from now and say, here's what we were able to continue
Hmm.
to contribute, what would that be for you?
Well, yeah, thank you. I this past year did some work to really ask that question, and I felt like it came to me, the idea of reimagining the good life. Because all of what I've just been describing, right? I was on the track to be living the good life with the handsome husband who's also very accomplished and has all the things, and Penny has been this catalyst for reimagining that. And what I've really come to understand is that the ways in which I can do that, in terms of just this like actual ability when it comes to communicating, is to challenge the assumptions about what makes life good, to ask the questions about, wait, do we really mean it that having the big house or the great grades or the lots of money, like, do we really mean that that's all there is, or is there more, or something different? So challenge assumptions, proclaim belovedness, to really actually insist upon and demonstrate and offer that sense of inherent belovedness for every human being. And then finally, to actually do that work of envisioning or imagining a world of belonging where everyone matters. And for me, again, that takes the shape of a lot of speaking, teaching, writing. I know other people who do that through much more direct advocacy work, or, building buildings that welcome people in different ways than some of our buildings already do. I mean, we could go on down the list. And then part of it for me, if I think of ahead 18 years, I'm curious to see the role that Penny gets to play in all of that. She is going to a program at a local university now. She really actually also loves reading and writing and communicating. I want her to have her own space, her own experiences, her own life to the degree that she wants that. But I also would love for her to be a part of doing this work if that's something that she desires. And I could see her, I mean, already she does she really likes Google Docs, where I will send her questions through a Google Doc about an experience she's had. And she will write her responses and give me permission to put it up on Instagram or something. And I would love to continue giving her a voice and a platform and seeing what might come from that, because I think that, again, helps to, challenge assumptions about what makes life good and proclaim belovedness and envision belonging.
Beautiful. I can't wait to be able to witness that transpire. I have 100% faith that exactly what you just described is in the process of coming to fruition. And I'm a huge advocate and willing participant to be able to help you realize what you had just described. I want to give our listeners the opportunity to hear how they can connect with you and to be able to see the writings that you have done and be able to connect with you. What's the best way that they could do that?
Well, one nice thing about my name is that nobody else has it. So Amy Julia Becker is actually really easy to find me. You can put that into pretty much anything. So I have a website, and it's just amyjuliabecker.com. And there, everything is there. So a link to the podcast or to any of the social media accounts or all the books. And I've got a lot of free resources there as well. So especially for parents of children with Down syndrome, but also actually there's a resource about receiving belovedness. There's lots of free resources there. But then you can also follow me on, Amy Julia Becker at Instagram or Substack or, all those different places. Just plug in my name and I'll be there.
Wonderful. If you were going to say to our listeners, start with this book, and knowing that our listeners are primarily families raising a loved one with a disability or that are on this journey or have a loved one with a disability, what book would you suggest they start with?
Yeah, the book that still sells the most and is also just, a good and perfect gift is the book I wrote right after. Well, it was published when Penny was 5, but it contains a lot of my journal entries from when she was early on. And it really is, yes, it's her story and about her as a child, but it's also, and probably more so, what it took for me to be able to receive her as a gift. So it's a spiritual memoir about, it doesn't, I don't think it even uses the word belovedness, but about what it took to receive her as a gift and then to recognize the world of opportunity that was available for her and for us when we could see her that way.
Perfect. Well, I know that's the next book that I'm going to be reading. So thank you so much for being a guest on the show. This has been such a pleasure and a joy to be able to learn from you. I feel like I've got a small bite of the initial appetizer to a 7-course meal that is before me. So I'm really excited to be able to dive into this. And thank you again, Amy Julia.
Well, thank you so much for having me. What a great conversation.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conquering Your Clownfish. If you liked what we discussed on the podcast today and want to continue the conversation, please visit us at conqueringyourclownfish.com. And please don't forget to subscribe.